Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're logging in from. My name is Karen Right-Hand, and I'm the Vice President of Corporate Marketing here at SCS Global Services, and I'll be your host today. On behalf of everyone here at SCS, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Benchmarking Water Stewardship in a Shifting Global Regulatory Landscape. Before I introduce our speakers for today, I'd like to take a moment to update you on our platform, GoToWebinar. To avoid any unnecessary background noises during the presentation, all attendees have been muted, and this will remain a one-way presentation for the duration of the event. If you would like to ask a question, please go to the questions section in the control panel on the upper right-hand side of your webinar console. Once you type in your question and hit send, your question will be sent to our panel for review. Be sure to ask your question when you're thinking about it. There's no need to wait until the end of the presentation. Depending on the time allotted at the end of the presentation, we'll make every effort to answer all questions submitted, but any questions that we're unable to answer today, we can take offline. Also, I wanted to let you know that today's presentation is being recorded and will be emailed to you following the webinar. And with that, let me introduce today's speakers. Next slide. So I've already introduced myself, and also joining us today are Lauren Enright, our Program Manager for Water Services, and Victoria Norman, who is the Executive Director of our SCS Standards organization. And for those of you that don't know SCS, I wanted to just say a few things. We are an international leader in third-party sustainability certification, consulting, and standards development. We have been around for 40 years this year, very proud accomplishment. We've got over 30,000 certifications done in 125 different countries. We have over 15,000 customers, and we have auditors in every major market. This is our institutional network. The SCS actually stands for Scientific Certification Systems, and SCS Global Services is our certification, verification, and auditing body. SCS Standards is a freestanding, nonprofit standards development organization. SCS Consulting is an independent consulting services division, and we've recently launched our Global Heat Reduction Initiative, which is aimed at slowing global warming with full climate accounting. And we work in every major sector in the economy. We do over 140 different certifications, so you can be sure that we're touching something in pretty much every sector. But water is one of those that kind of crosses all sectors. So we're excited to get into that topic today. And we have people located all across the world. So we've got you covered no matter where you're based. And with that, I'd like to introduce Victoria Norman, who will start us off by talking a little bit about the development of our new water stewardship standard. Victoria?
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's really exciting to be talking to you about our new water standard as we launch today. A little bit about SCS Standards. We are an ANSI accredited standard development organization. We were founded in 2020, and we act as the official standard development arm of SCS Global Services. And as you saw from the slides Karen presented, we draw from SCS's 40 years of experience in the world of certification, verification, and validation across a really wide range of industries. By being accredited to ANSI and authorized to develop national standards, SCS Standards has very well established procedures to follow as we go through the different stages of standard development process, be that the scoping of the project, and we'll go a little bit into that in the next slide, the drafting of the content, public consultation, review, and finally the finalization and release of the standard, which is where we are today. specific to the SCS certification standard for water stewardship and resiliency, and I acknowledge that this is quite a mouthful of a title. Thank goodness we have a shorter title, SCS 116. So for SCS 116, we started the process over a year ago and consulted many experts along the way to both provide input in the direction that we were going and also feedback on how we were doing in going in that direction. And many of you on the call today are likely aware that in April 2024, we held our public consultation period. It was 30 days and the standard was the draft standard was released to the world for public comments. We received many comments from the public, including input from folks from academia, nonprofits, consulting firms, government, auditors, and other private sector industries. So it was a really successful public consultation, and we got a lot of very interesting and valuable input. Throughout the month of May, we really carefully considered all of those comments and made changes to the standard accordingly. You know, not obviously some comments are contradictory, so there were a lot of decisions to be made, but it was a very helpful exercise for us to finalize and kind of polish our standard that we are delighted to launch today as final version 1. Next slide, please. So to talk to you a little bit about the what and the why of this standard development process. To develop SCS 116, we conducted a review of the reporting, disclosure, and certification landscape, really to determine where there were gaps and opportunities for a water stewardship and resiliency standard. If some of you are familiar with the world of standards and certification, there's a tendency for folks to think that, you know, we're creating the standard that will reign them all, and that's the one solution to everything. I think I'm a little more realistic than that and know that that's not the case. And so it's more a question of looking for the gap in the market, looking for the opportunity to bring a different value proposition to the market. And so since we did find that there are tools already in the marketplace, the standard actually recognizes existing water and sustainability standards and frameworks to allow for a more streamlined auditing process and potentially less work for organizations that want to undergo certification. The landscape review that we conducted really allowed us to define the scope of the standard. So as I mentioned, you know, this is not the standard that is going to replace them all. This is one tool in the toolbox that's available to folks. And so as part of this exercise of defining the scope, we determined that we should go for a site-specific certification. And because we want the standard to be accessible to organizations at different stages of their journey to water stewardship and resiliency, we have a kind of ladder system where we have core indicators that everyone needs to meet to be certified and that require year-over-year improvement in some metrics. And then we have optional trailblazer requirements that promote best practices, opportunities, and site-relevant actions. And Lauren will tell you a little bit more about those in the next few slides. And lastly, and kind of circling back to this idea of the scope of this standard and how it's specific to a site, this standard is final in that it's version 1 now, but it's not really set in stone. There will be next iterations of the standard as we learn from the field application of the standard, changes in technologies, landscape, best practices, and this is the first standard of what we hope to create a series of water standards to tackle different aspects of the water journey of organizations. And so I'm going to hand it over to Lauren, who is going to talk to you a little bit more about the landscape review that we conducted. So as you can see from this slide, we reviewed a bunch of frameworks, disclosures, mandatory and voluntary in the marketplace to help us really hone in on the scope of our standard. On to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Victoria, for the introduction, as well as Karen. And thank you for everyone for joining. As Victoria mentioned, last year, we performed a comprehensive gap analysis on international and country standards, frameworks, initiatives, and guidelines pertaining specifically to water and its connection to climate adaptation, mitigation, biodiversity, nature-based solutions, innovative tech, water circularity, and water quality. We thoroughly analyzed these gaps, both in standards and framework, as well as the marketplace, and really saw the opportunity to develop our water stewardship and resiliency standard. We understand really that this landscape of corporate disclosures is vast and complex. We understand that water-related reporting has seen significant evolution over the last several years, if not last 20, 30 years. And it's shaped by the increasing awareness of water scarcity, climate change impacts, and the importance of sustainable water management. This is really characterized by mandatory regulations imposed by governments internationally and voluntary frameworks adopted by organizations. Many of these mandatory disclosures that you're viewing on this screen right now are really based on voluntary disclosures and guidelines. The fact is that organizations that were already adhering to these voluntary principles are now a step ahead in disclosing information. SCS really saw the gap in the marketplace to be able to achieve a higher level of best practice. We are merely trying to elevate what is water stewardship in the field. With these specific voluntary reporting disclosures, we really saw the need to say, how can actually an organization feel that readily practical implementation, as well as being able to point themselves in a direction to further their own sustainability practices. As Victoria mentioned, we decided to first keep the iteration version 1 to site level certification. And really, it's the need to be able to see what are the benefits for the organization in that site level certification, as well as the benefits for the site's operation and processes. Firstly, we see the benefits to the organization through enhanced reputation and brand value. It signals to customers, investors, and other stakeholders that a company is committed to water stewardship and resiliency, thus enhancing the brand's reputation and increasing its attractiveness to environmentally conscious consumers and investors. We see this enhancing investor confidence, where investors see credible evidence of a company's commitment to water stewardship and potentially improving access to capital and investor confidence. SCS also sees this as a competitive advantage in market access, which can be a key market driver for suppliers with certified water stewardship practices. Certifications can also open up new market opportunities and strengthen existing relationships. We also see this as long-term sustainability for an organization, where certified sites are better positioned to adapt to changing environmental conditions and resource constraints. It's critical for the ongoing viability of the broader business. And moving on with the benefits of the site's operation and processes. SCS sees this and has implemented within the standard the idea of operational efficiency, which identifies the opportunities for improving water use efficiency, leading to cost savings and more efficient operations, thus translating into significant financial benefits over time. Stakeholder engagement. Water stewardship is central around stakeholder engagement. Involving stakeholders can build trust and foster collaborative approaches to water management. Risk mitigation. Identifying and mitigating water-related risks, water scarcity, regulatory compliance issues, and potential conflict with local communities. We see this proactive approach minimizing business disruptions and enhancing operational resilience. Regulatory compliance. As governments around the world tighten water-related regulations, We see this benefit as reducing the risk of legal penalties and enhancing the site's reputation with regulators. Community relations. A commitment to responsible water use can improve relations with local communities and stakeholders in regions where water is a scarce and contested resource. Sustainable water management. Where sites are managing water resources sustainably, we see efficient water use, reducing waste, and protecting water quality, which are essential for the long-term environmental health of the actual site and its surrounding community. And lastly, environmental protection, which contributes to the broader environmental goals of the organization, including biodiversity and maintaining the ecosystem around the site, thus reducing pollution, toxins. And with that said, I'd like to sort of add the fact that really the importance and value of a certification hones in to where that actual organization is at within their own journey. So a lot of the times we're noticing where clients are at, whether it's very advanced or very novice to where they are in their water stewardship journey. We said that we see this standard as meeting them right where they are. They're not having to be at a crazy advanced level. They could just be really entering into the marketplace and being able to really understand what their water metrics are through the core of consumption and discharge and understanding their water balance. So really jumping into how we created this and why we created this, it was really, I think, a helpful sort of introduction to be able to really go, who is this for and why? And we really see the Water Stewardship and Resiliency Standard as for all organizations across the globe, with the caveat that they will actually use likely a sector-specific standard in conjunction. And it's what we've heard for the last few years, and it's sort of what is moving this water stewardship channel further and further forward. So we really developed the standard in line with meeting the organization where they are at in their sustainability journey, and really allowing them to measure their baseline water performance, setting measurable, local, and contextual relevant targets, thus demonstrating practices that enhance their water stewardship and resiliency and monitoring progress year over year. We really also saw the need to create practical channels of opportunity, as Victoria mentioned earlier, to really enhance where that company is at in both their reporting, in their business models, in reputational risks, and in pressures from investors. We see this also in taking a step further in creating behavioral change to actually influence the culture of their company. Our intent of developing the SCS 116 standard was as an initial building block in the landscape of water stewardship and resiliency. We wanted it to be practical and accessible, with the core set of requirements that allow an organization to establish their baseline and establish targets to improve over time. Our modular approach through these trailblazer requirements provides users the opportunity to focus on topics that are most relevant to their organization's site's needs, risks, and priorities. SCS really intended to support sites to integrate their water stewardship and resiliency practices with their current and future initiatives. As Victoria mentioned earlier in the presentation, we really decided across the board to include nature-based solutions, natural habitats and biodiversity impacts, innovative tech, water circularity, net zero water use, net positive water use, water quality improvement, community engagement, in terms of highlighting where we are in connecting with an organization's own best practices. If you look at these specific trailblazers, not all of them are going to pertain to the specific organization or to your specific site, but a likely half or more will pertain to that specific site. So speaking with clients, even in the last several months, and connecting them to these specific indicators has given me a chance to really involve where they are at in their own sustainability journey and not just hone in on one specific silo to where water has been seen in the past. So really being able to bridge into these lateral categories that we sort of are trying to enmesh in with what is water stewardship. We see innovative tech as something to be transformational in being able to connect with both pilot and readily available technologies to be able to disseminate those on the ground and showcase them. We see nature-based solutions and biodiversity as interconnected. There's not one or the other, they really merge together, and we can speak about that later, or I can speak to you offline. Water circularity has been a topic that has been in the news and filtering around for decades. It's something that needs to be risen to the surface and actually be achieved and recognized by organizations. Net zero water use and net positive water use are scrutinized terms and are also readily, easily, and also achievable in the ways that they can be moved forward. We see this as an iteration of our standard to be able to know that net zero water use is already where clients are going to be achieved, and creating that claim behind it is something very necessary. As Karen and as Victoria pointed out earlier in the presentation around SCS and our independent, credible, third-party verification and certification systems. Water quality improvement is something very close and dear to my heart, and I hope it is very dear to where you are in your own journey in understanding really how water quality is affecting our products, our assets, and lastly, and most importantly, our health. And community engagement, something that really is impactful upon so many pieces to this standard has been where is actually the site's connection to their own community, whether affluent or whether in a developed country. That impact upon community is something that will not only enhance the site's reputation, but actually bring lasting impact and change to the culture of the organization and vice versa. And lastly, I will go through the certification process, the steps to really achieve and maintain certification. On our website, launching today, you will see an application form being shown to be able to submit the organization's name and any kind of scope details about the specific site and relevant details for the application process. We then go through, and it's optional to complete a self-assessment as well as stage 1 audit. The stage 1 audit is a document review and a desk audit. Addressing the stage 1 audit will then move into stage 2, which will be an on-site audit, likely lasting a half a day. Moving on to reviewing and responding audit findings. And lastly, through a technical review process, a certification decision will be made.
Thank you, Lauren. That was great. And I just want to be able to start taking some questions. So if you have a question for either Lauren or Victoria, please go ahead and type it into the question field, and we'll start diving into some questions. Before we do, I just want to thank both of our presenters and let you know that we have a second webinar coming up on Wednesday, July 17th, that will really just take you through the steps of the actual certification. Today was a little more about the development of the standard, and the second webinar will really be a little more about the specifics of the actual certification. So the first question that we have is, how does this dovetail with the Water Council's WAVE program? And Lauren, I'll let you take that one.
Sure, thanks for the question. So SCS has a partnership with the Water Council, and we are the sole certifier to the WAVE program. In connection to the WAVE program, their verification is an enterprise-wide claim, whereas this specific standard, the SCS 116, is very specific to a site. So I would say it dovetails into it as looking at your overall enterprise, and say you have over 1,000 sites or 100 sites, you'd be able to actually prioritize from a risk perspective, what are those specific priority sites that need to be deemed certified and need to go into a more granular detail. And that is exactly what this certification provides.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Victoria, here's a question for you. What does recognize as existing certification schemes mean? Is that adopting equivalency where criteria are overlapping, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you, Karen, and thank you to whoever asked that question. By recognizing existing certification schemes, it means that if an organization is certified to, for example, ISO 14001, there may, some of the information that is provided for 14001 can be used to demonstrate conformity with the SCS 116 standard. It'll also allow for some bundled audits, presumably, if the certification body can do multiple, or the auditor is qualified for multiple scopes. It could be one audit for multiple scopes at once. So really reducing the burden on the person undergoing the certification. To be clear, it's not because someone is certified to ISO 14001 that they would not, there wouldn't be a verification that they meet all of the requirements of the standard. That would be the decision of the certification body based on a risk assessment, presumably. But the idea is just that there is overlap. There will be a tool that kind of shows where the gaps are, so that to help organizations that may already be certified to, for example, 14001, to really just focus on those gaps, because they already meet the other, they already know they meet the other requirements.
Perfect, perfect. And Lauren, here's a question for you. Could you provide a good example of net zero or net positive water use?
Sure, that's a great question, actually. So net zero water use is primarily looked at through collecting and gathering data on regional water resources. So surface and groundwater availability, annual rainfall, river level flows, aquifer levels are really important components to mapping out water stress levels. So looking at actual examples to achieve a net zero plan could be through reducing demand by implementing innovative technologies and practices that consume less water. Technologies could, so technologies could really include like low flow toilets, faucets, promoting water-wise behaviors, optimizing irrigation systems. We're really getting into then the water use intensity of a specific site. So looking at the measure use of production, whether it's in a service or specific activity, to really track the efficiency improvements over time. What you would then want to do is really look at creating an alternative, water source to offset that purchased water. So if it's through rainfall and the sources are coming through, say, like rainwater harvesting or stormwater capture, you would then go in and quantify the volume of rainwater captured and utilize it for separate purposes. There's obviously other examples out there regarding water recycling and implementing, green infrastructure, looking at wastewater treatment. But those are a few. If you provide me the contact name, I'm happy to follow up with more examples.
Yeah, you'll have that. I've got a few more questions here, but before everyone leaves the webinar, I do want to say that everyone should be encouraged to go to scsstandards.org and go to the standards library and actually look at the standard. I believe, Victoria, they can just download it, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's important. So as a follow-on, Lauren, to the question that you just tackled, can you achieve net zero or net positive water by using water credits?
You absolutely cannot, and we have not really, we have been asked that question, I think, for the last 6 to 8 months, and have been in discussions with numerous people around what are credits and achieving restoration benefits. But essentially in this standard, we are not accepting water credits.
Okay.
And Victoria, if you want to elaborate on that, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, the whole sector and industry of water credits is still very novel. And so this version of it does not. This may change in the future as, more information, more requirements, and potentially more regulation come out with regards to how water credits actually function and are traded and regulated.
Wonderful.
The website, I just saw a question come in. Sorry,
yes,
I was gonna.
It's SCS Standards.org. And I think with that, we will leave it there. I want to thank again our presenters and thank all of you for attending. And we hope to see you on the next webinar on July 17th. Thank you very much. You will receive a recording within the next day or so. Have a great day.